something I thought I knew, but I wanted to make sure. I know I put it in my notes, but then I was like, well, I don't know if this is actual fact, but I think I'm, I think I'm accurate. I think I'm accurate. I think I am. I think I am. I think I am. So, all right, here we go. There's the notification. All right, let me do a search for Theology Central. Maybe if I can find it. Here we go. Make sure we sound okay. Maybe. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. I'm waiting to hear myself. All right, let me do a search for Theology Central. Okay, do that. Turn off the chat. Maybe if, all right, we can close that. Now let's go over to the Sermon Audio platform. Make sure we're still there. Oh, we're the only ones broadcasting today. All right, let me do a search for Theology Central. Okay. All right, we should begin here in just a second, ladies and gentlemen. We should begin here in just a second. Give it just a couple of minutes and we will begin. I want to make sure the live stream is working correctly. We tried earlier and we had a slight technical glitch. It was weird. We got booted off. the Sermon Audio platform not only booted us off, it deactivated our account and said that we had left the live stream on, but I was in the middle of broadcasting when it kicked us off. So I don't know what that was all about, but hopefully everything is working correctly and we will not have that problem again. And if for some reason the live stream does cut out, just know the broadcast is being recorded on separate software. So if the live stream crashes, then I just take the recording when I'm done and then upload that recording. So it will, the recording always shows up. Well, depending on which podcast apps you may have, it can possibly be there within about 5 minutes of the broadcast ending. If you're waiting for it to show up on any of the Sermon Audio platform, the Church One app, the Sermon Audio app, or the website, it usually shows up about 10 to 12 minutes after the broadcast because I have to manually upload it there. So, all right, I think we're good to go. All right, this should be... Okay, I don't think I'm going to read everything on this paper, but okay. I've got my notes here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we do this. We go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, July the 8th, 2025. It is currently 4:13 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, it's time once again for us to, talk about music. We have begun a series on the Song of the Summer 2025. We started this, and I hope that it's been beneficial so far this summer. What we're trying to do is step away from maybe not so much theological discussions. We're kind of stepping away maybe from the rhythm and the flow of the church, and we're stepping into the rhythm and the flow of the culture, looking at what's on the music charts. And we've been exploring the Billboard Hot 100, trying to kind of see what everyone is listening to in the summer of 2025. That's what we have been doing, and we've covered most of the songs on the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 right now. We've covered most of the things. I could go through the chart right here. I could read all the songs, but we've covered a good majority of them. There's still some things we can talk about, and we've got plenty of time before the summer of 2025 is over. We've got plenty of time to do that. So, as we continue, and I was thinking, okay, it's a new week. It's already Tuesday of a new week. I've got to do something for our the Song of the Summer 2025 series. I have to do something. What do I do? And then I started thinking, July 7th, July 8th, 2025. Wait, July 7th, I remember a July. Wasn't 2025. Wasn't 2024. In fact, I have to go way, way back. the summer of 1984. And a particular song went number one on the Billboard Hot 100. I think it either happened on June the 7th or June the 8th, 1984. I don't know for sure which day the chart was dated. I think it was June 7th, June the 8th. I may have it in my notes somewhere here, so if I get to it, I will give you the specific date. But I started thinking about that particular song that hit number one on the chart on June the 7th, June the 8th, 1984. Some of you may know what it is. Some of you may not have any clue. Some of you may not even have been alive at the time and don't even care. But for me, I will always remember that summer of 1984 for many reasons. The song is just one of those reasons. And well, the movie that song was a part of its soundtrack, I will always remember it. It had a profound impact on me. So I thought for a little bit of fun, while we're looking at the song of the summer for 2025, we'll do a little throwback. We'll do a little throwback for the song of the summer 2025, and we'll go back to the summer of 1984. Now, for me, the summer of 1984, let's go back to, well, the final bell. You all know that. Don't you remember those days sitting in school and you're just waiting for the bell to ring because you know when that bell rings, you are out of school for the summer. You have that freedom. You don't have to get up in the morning and come back. You don't have to study for any tests. You don't have any homework. You don't have to deal with all of the stupid garbage that goes on in high school or in school. You're just free. You remember that bell? The bell rings and you drop everything. The backpacks hit the floor, everything just gets thrown down. You don't care about anything because just like that, with the sound of that one bell, you are free. And I love that feeling of freedom, right? I mean, come on, that's a great feeling, all right? You got no more homework. You got no more crowded hallways. You got no more teachers getting on your case. You got no more peer pressure, no more bullies. You walk out of school and immediately, well, I can only speak for me because when the bell rings for summer vacation in Texas, as soon as you walk out the door, you get hit in the face with that summer heat because it's already 127 degrees by the time summer break comes around, right? You're already ready to go. So you walk out and you don't even care about the heat. You don't even care about that. All you care about is the promise, in a sense. It's the promise of a summer. What's going to happen? Freedom, excitement, all of those things, right? And for me, summer 1984, well, if you knew me back then, you know what I had with me 24/7, 7 days a week, always on my person. I had a Walkman with a pair of headphones, and I was always listening to something. I spent a good portion of my time in school going to the back of the class, turning my desk away from everyone, putting headphones on, and basically ignoring the whole world, okay? I would do if they gave me something to do, but I didn't participate in anything else, all right? So I had a Walkman, I had fresh batteries, and I had MTV blasting wherever and however I could watch it, however I could see it, because it was 1984. MTV was everywhere. I mean, come on. It was the Walkman. It was MTV. It was the summer of 84. Now, Ronald Reagan, if you wanted to kind of step back into the culture at that time, Ronald Reagan, I think, was heading towards re-election. I think the Karate Kid was making every kid want to learn the crane kick around that time. I think it was the summer of 84 as well for Karate Kid, if I remember correctly. Ghostbusters was blowing up the box office. Radio, we had Madonna, we had Springsteen, we had Cyndi Lauper, we had Michael Jackson, we had all of that. But something else was starting to rise at the time. Now, I am giving a Cliff Notes version of the music scene in 1984. Please, I'm just going through the names that people will immediately note. I hate that because it almost turns... I always hate when you reference back to a period of time because a lot of times it turns into a stereotype. It turns into a trope, right? That everyone in the 80s was doing this or doing this or doing this or doing that or listening to this, when it's always much more nuanced than that, right? Because even in the music world, there were a lot of people maybe listening to Madonna or Springsteen or Lauper, but there were a lot of people listening to much more indie alternative type scene that was going on as well. And MTV was allowing us to discover music that we had never heard before or even had access to. So there was a lot of music discovery going on at that time as well. So I don't want to reduce it to that, but so there was a lot of sounds. There was a lot of things going on. But in the more mainstream, I'll say something darker, something more seductive was beginning to rise, was beginning to kind of be right there under the surface, making its way to the top. Now, if you know what I'm referring to, you know it kind of starts with, I don't know, how do we describe it? The scream of a guitar, kind of a modulated voice. It has kind of a synthetic beat. And if you really pay attention, it had no bass line, which was very, 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 very unique because the artist in this particular song that I'm going to be referencing chose during the mixing process to remove the bass line, which gave it a very unique sound, kind of very revolutionary to say at the time. So you had a synthetic beat, a modulated voice there at the beginning, that screaming guitar. I don't know if there was anything really warning for it, but it was just Prince. Dig, if you will, the picture. And with those words, suddenly, everything changes. Now, that puts us June of 1984. That puts us kind of right there because that's when the song that I'm going to be referencing hits number one, right? The particular song that I'm referring to is When Doves Cry by Prince. If you did not know, if you didn't have a clue, I was kind of leaving a little bit vague to see if you could fill in the blanks, but When Doves Cry by Prince becomes number one on the Billboard Hot 100 somewhere June 7th, June 8th, 1984. So I will always connect the song really to the summer of 84. But if you want to go back, it's not June. The song was released in May. I think it was May the 16th when the song was initially released. All right. He dropped a single. And I think when the single is dropped, at least for me, didn't sound like anything else. I mean, I could probably go find some things going, well, it sounded like this, that. But I'm thinking for the most part, it sounded very, very, very unique, at least for my perspective. Now, by July the 7th, the song has now kind of just captured everything. I think by the time you get to July the 7th, it's already, it becomes number one like July the 7th or 8th. So it's May the 16th when it's released. And I think if I try to remember, it felt like for me, from the second I heard it, because you had to hear it on radio, from the second I heard it, I was like, whoa, what is this? But I think according to more like, if we try to look at it from a statistical standpoint, it seemed like it was a little slow at first from catching on, maybe because it just sounded so different to maybe some people. That's at least the way I think some people tell the story. To me, it felt like it blew up. But I just know by the time school was out and summer was going, by the time I got to July, the whole world knew the song When Doves Cry at that point. It was everywhere. And by July the 7th or 8th, it had become the number one song in the country. And When Doves Cry, it's not a love song. It's a fracture. It's a scream. It kind of captures something that maybe kids in 1984 hadn't heard, at least on Top 40 radio before. I don't think we had heard anything quite like it on Top 40 radio. Now, again, I would have to go back and look at the charts and try to 100% be accurate, but it at least felt like something completely new and completely unique. At the same time, though, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. If you were young watching MTV hour after hour, you were getting bombarded with all kinds of new sounds, all kinds of new bands, because it was just like there's no other way to put it. It was like a drug overdose. You turned on MTV and it was like someone taking a syringe, putting it in your vein and just injecting a whole new world of music that you didn't even know existed. And you were like, I got to go find that album. I got to go find that. Wait, write that one down. You would make a list. You would sit there with a piece of paper just going, okay, name of this artist, name of this artist. And then you would go to the record store and be like, I only can afford one of them. Okay, but so in some ways, it sounded completely unique, but in other ways, you'd been bombarded with so many unique things. I don't know if we immediately thought, I've never heard anything like this before. I think we probably thought more like, oh, this is so awesome, and this is so cool. Now, kids who did not have MTV, and all they were allowed to hear was Top 40 radio, it had to sound pretty, whoa, what is going on? And especially if they were listening to the lyrics, even into the sound of the voice, because it was emotional. It was vulnerable, I think very vulnerable. It was mixed with kind of I don't know if there's any other way to say it, sexual tension. Definitely had that feeling of family trauma. And somewhat of a spiritual confusion. All of this was kind of pressed into about a 5-minute and 48 seconds of sonic experimentation is what it sounded like. I think it's about 5 minutes, 48 seconds. I listened to it again today, just a little while ago. I think it's about 5 minutes and 48 seconds. If I have the timestamp wrong, I apologize. I believe it's about 5 minutes and 48 seconds long. If I'm wrong, I've got to be pretty close because I've only heard the song about 27 billion times in my life. All right. That's a little bit of hyperbole. But all of that. So it had emotional vulnerability. I think that's all over the song. In fact, many of the songs in the album have emotional vulnerability. If we talk about the actual album, which was called Purple Rain, which the name of the movie was Purple Rain. But when Doves Cry captured that same emotional vulnerability, it had definitely that raw kind of sexual tension, which Prince was definitely known for in his music. Family trauma, which plays a major part in the movie. Spiritual confusion, which if you know the history of Prince's music, spiritual confusion all day long in Prince's music. It can go from, oh, this sounds very spiritual to that goes to absolute explicit, all within the, span of, 5 minutes and 48 seconds. And you had a lot of sonic experimentation. I think that would be fair to say. And for millions of us teenagers in 1984, July of 1984, and if I said June of 1984 at any point, I apologize, July of 1984, Prince, for many of us, wasn't just an artist. I think we saw him as something more than an artist. I think we were in our minds, or at least in my mind, I was watching this person become a legend in real time. First we get the song, then we get the album, then we get the movie, which was very brilliant from a business perspective. Give us a song. Now you just give me a taste. Oh, wow, this is amazing. Now you give me the album. Okay, I'm going to listen to this 50 times and analyze it to death, which I did every album. And then that had me just like, oh, the movie is coming out? Take all of my money. I'll sell my blood to go see this movie. I'll rob a liquor store to go see this movie. Like it had you ready to go. It had you ready to go. And that's the way I remember it happening, was the single, the album, and then the movie. At least that's the way I remember it. And in a way, summer of 1984 then became the summer of Prince. It really did. From the moment school was out, you had the song, When Doves Cry, then you get the album, and then ultimately you get the music. And When Doves Cry, it wasn't just a hit. I mean, it was a hit. It became number one. I think for many it was a mirror. So today, I thought about doing this at night is what I thought about doing this, but I decided to do it during the day because it captures that, walking out of school for 1984 and just what I was walking into in the, that afternoon. And so I'm doing this in the afternoon because I think it captures it a little bit, right? That those summer days, those hot summer afternoons where Prince was, the soundtrack for much of that. I mean, there was a lot of soundtracks for the summer of 1984 because of how much, I listened to so much music then. I listen to more music now than I did then. It was everywhere. So for this afternoon, when I originally put this together, I put tonight down in my notes, but for this afternoon, whether you lived it, or maybe you've only heard the echoes, we're going to take a drive back to the summer where heartbreak, physical pleasure, God, identity, and a purple motorcycle all collided into one unforgettable track and one very emotional summer. This is another episode in our series, The Song of the Summer. This time we go to the Song of the Summer 1984, and this is When Doves Cry by Prince. So let's begin with some facts. When Doves Cry was released on May the 16th, 1984, as the lead single from Prince's upcoming album, Purple Rain, at that time, the album hadn't even dropped yet. The movie wasn't out either. The song was the world's first taste of this, we'll call it the Purple Rain universe. And at least for me, I feel like it was unlike anything anyone was expecting. Now, you got to remember, though, back in 1984 as a teenager, unless you were buying lots of music magazines, right? A lot of times you didn't know what was coming out. A lot of times you maybe if you were in a record store, sometimes you could find out. Sometimes they would have a little board telling you albums that were coming out. Sometimes you would know that way. Some record stores didn't even have that. Sometimes you were just kind of, in a sense, driving in the dark, right? And so how did you find out when a new song came out? When the DJ on the radio going, here's the brand new song by Prince from his upcoming album, Purple Rain. The movie will be out in a month. Or one of the VJs on MTV said, here's the first video from the upcoming album, Purple Rain by Prince. It was either a VJ or a DJ, and then you would hear it. And that's how you knew, right? Because most of the cases you didn't have a lot of information to go by. I'm not saying the information wasn't available, but as a teenager with limited resources, you were kind of like, well, hopefully the DJ or the VJ tells me. So, and again, this is the first taste to this, we'll call it the Purple Rain universe. And so I looked at a couple of sources. Almost all sources agree that it debuted in a modest way. It was modest, the reception. Again, I don't remember it that way. I remember it as, whoa, what is this? Now, but at the same time, I was, call me the music nerd. Music was my life. It still is my life in many ways. So, I probably had a stronger reaction. I probably was running around going, this is the greatest thing in the world. Everybody better pay attention to this. And everybody was like, yeah, leave me alone. But by the time you get to July 7th, 1984, it's the number one song in America. So I think by July 7th, it was number one. Again, I still question my accuracy there, but I think it's July 7th, 1984. And it not only did it make it number one, it stayed number one for 5 straight weeks. It became Prince's first Billboard Hot 100 number one and the best-selling single of 1984 in the United States. So I cannot state enough. I can't overstate the significance the song played in that summer of 84 and for that year, right? So I want you to, and I know older people are like, oh, I thought the song was garbage and I was never a fan. Okay, I get it. And people always love to email me when I talk about music. Oh, I thought it was trash. Okay, well, congratulations. Okay, great. I don't know what to tell you. Does that make you superior? I don't know what that does. Okay, wonderful. But, well, I was in love. I was in love with this song. Oh, and it had such a profound impact on me. Now, in some ways, I think it's fair to say that the success for the song was somewhat strange. At least I feel it was somewhat strange. Because in many ways, it wasn't. In some ways, it wasn't a normal pop song, at least for the summer, July of 1984. And I think one of the things that some people catch it, some people don't, there's no bass line. Prince deliberately stripped it out after recording the track. And in a sense, he defied every rule of radio mixing at the time. At that time, you left the bass line in. You need the bass line. But he felt it made it too conventional. It made it sound like everything else, and he didn't want it to sound like everything else. So he reached, in the mixing, and they pulled out the bass line. Now, some people catch that, some people don't. Some people argue about that. But it seems to be a pretty established fact that the bass line is gone. And I think if you listen to it, you will hear that. The opening is the scream of the guitar. It's dry, it's aggressive, it's not smoothed out by reverb in any way, shape, or form. It demands your attention, and then you get this modulated voice saying, yeah, 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 over and over and over and over and over again. It's kind of modulated, yeah. It's awesome, that's all I can say. The drum machine is raw, kind of robotic. The keyboard, I don't know how to, the keyboard almost gives it kind of an uplifting sound, right? Between the modulated voice and the guitar, you get kind of one emotional vibe, and then the keyboard kind of gives you a different kind of vibe. I think it's almost like a different emotional sensations you get. The guitar solo obviously kind of just gives you lots of emotion, and then it kind of drops away. The voice, when it finally comes in, when he's finally ready to sing, I think you can hear a little bit of, it's fragile, it's seductive, at times angry. It's going to get angry by the time he reaches out. Or do you just say angry or just filled with pain? I don't know, because there's going to be a major scream in the song that resonates with me deeply. Definitely, it's vulnerable. That's the thing I like, the vulnerability of it, because he's like this man becoming a legend in real time. He's Prince, but he's vulnerable. And you're like, well, I'm a teenager and I'm vulnerable. If he can be vulnerable, then I'm okay to be vulnerable, kind of thing. It's definitely accusatory in some ways, but there's a pleading in the song as well. The song it kind of felt like a breakup, which it does feel like that. But for me, I always thought if you just reduce it to a breakup song, you're missing the point. It's kind of a psychological breakdown. That's what it felt to me, like a psychological breakdown. To me, it didn't, how can I say this? It didn't just describe emotion, it's descriptive, but to me, it sounded like it was the emotion. I think that's what I loved about it. It described emotion, but the sound was the emotion. The sound of it was the emotion. You see, this wasn't a song I turned on to drift away to some pop fantasy. It felt like this was a song that made me live in my reality, and it was a fractured confession about reality. And I think that caught everyone off guard, or at least it caught me off guard. Now, this wasn't Eye of the Tiger. It wasn't Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. This was something closer to a cry for help than a dance track. And yet somehow it was a dance track. Like, it was kind of interesting. Like, this is like a cry for help, but you could also move to it to a certain level. But then I could get so caught up in the emotions. Did you want to move to it? Oh, there was a lot going on in this song. In some ways, what Prince pulled off was radical. At least I feel it was. Maybe you don't feel like it's so radical in 1984 and 2025, but in 1984, I believe it was radical. I think he made emotional chaos into a hit. I'm not saying no one had done it before, and I'm not saying no one did it after. I'm just saying that at this particular time, he was doing it. And I think in a way, from the sound of that electric guitar right from the beginning of that song and that modulated voice, yeah, right from the very beginning, It's kind of, he just reached through the speaker, grabbed you and pulled your entire summer into his world, into Purple Rain's universe. And he pulled you into a world where I think obviously doves cried. Yeah, because when doves cry, love suffocated, and in a sense where heaven and hell collided on vinyl or, well, on cassette or however you were listening to Purple Rain at the time. I think some artists try to make heartbreak sound beautiful. I felt Prince made heartbreak sound like heartbreak. Right? I think that's the thing about, I think he made heartbreak sound like heartbreak instead of making it sound beautiful. Now, not all artists try to make it sound beautiful. Others try to capture you with the heartbreak as well. But I think the sound here captured heartbreak. And I don't feel in When Doves Cry, I don't think, at least for me, I don't believe he was trying to beg someone to come back. I think he was trying to understand himself. At least for me, I cannot speak for you because everyone approaches and feels different things with art. The song is haunted by family trauma, which would be very much then it become a soundtrack to my actual life. Spiritual confusion. And I don't know if I can't say that this would have been, in my mind at that time, but this also deals with frustration because of a lack of maybe or missing or needing physical intimacy. I think the song captures frustration, spiritual confusion, and family trauma, right? It captures frustration because of the need for physical intimacy, spiritual confusion, because you're living in the midst of family trauma. I think all of it is kind of encapsulated in the song to some level. I think you could say that if we were to make a list of mainstream songs that do this, it takes romantic ruin, parental dysfunction, some kind of religious weight, and all wraps it together. And you hear that a lot in Prince's music. You have romantic ruin, you have dysfunction of some sort, and you have religious weight. And it always kind of tells this broader story because of his own, I think he was raised Jehovah's Witness. I think, if I remember correctly, he had his own religious issues, but then he also had family trauma. And then obviously there was a lot of things going on with physical intimacy in the mind of Prince. And I think you see that throughout the song. But while all of this was happening, he did it in a song, well, that us teenagers were walking around blasting from our boomboxes all summer long, or listening to on our Walkman, or listening to via MTV. So let's try to go through the song, because I believe the song kind of pulses with emotional and symbolic meaning. At least I'd feel like that. I don't think Prince is simply singing about heartbreak. Is he kind of excavating, digging into the foundations of human dysfunction? Does he go into, he strips away and gets down to human dysfunction? Only you can tell me what you think, all right? So we start with, dig, if you will, the picture of you and I engaged in a kiss. Dig, if you will, the picture of you and I engaged in a kiss. Now, this doesn't come across as a plea. It's kind of an invitation to imagine, to enter into a mental scene. Now, he can be speaking to someone specifically, right? Hey, dig, if you will, like dig it, right? Think about this. This picture of you and I engaged in a kiss. He's asking someone to enter into a mental scene. Dig, if you will, the picture as if he's laying down a photograph, inviting us into the intimacy of a moment. He's kind of inviting everyone into this moment. We can picture a kiss, right? It's kind of tactile, it's sensory, it's vulnerable, right? Hey, let's picture the scene of you and I in a kiss. Whoever he's referring to, we're being invited to see this. He's speaking to someone for them to imagine this. Everyone's being brought in to imagine this this kiss. Now, this is where it gets a little bit, we're talking about Prince here, so the lyrics are not known for his songs constantly have hints of obviously physical relationship here. So I'm going to go through the line. There's nothing explicit, but just so that you know, we're getting ready to talk about this because, if you try to deal with the lyrics in a meaningful way, typically Christians will get offended. So this is a good time to stop listening if you don't want to get offended. All right, here we go. Then he sings these lines. The sweat of your body covers me. Can you, darling, can you picture this? Now, this isn't supposed to be sweet. It's kind of fevered. Passion. It's overwhelming. It's suffocating. It almost like, I don't know, that this sweat of your body is supposed to show kind of a desire that maybe borders on desperation and need. It captures a lot in just that imagery, right? This is something strong and powerful. Dream, if you can, a courtyard, an ocean of violence and bloom. Now he kind of goes from this very almost explicit, graphic picture of a kiss, of this physical intimacy, to now he kind of goes to kind of a poetic imagery, a courtyard, an ocean of violence and bloom. Now it's beautiful, it's lush. But is it emotionally dissonant? I don't know. There's something. It's a major shift. It's kind of, because I think now it's entering into a dreamscape, right? There's this more raw expression. Now there's this kind of poetic expression. Animals strike curious poses. They feel the heat between me and you. So it's like there's this poetic expression, but then there's this raw thing that's still present. The animals are acting strange. They strike curious poses. Something primal is stirring. This is not just tension, erotic tension. It's spiritual and psychological heat, maybe bordering on chaos. This is so powerful and so strong. How can you just leave me standing alone in a world that's so cold? Now we go from this passion, this poetic expression, to this just heartbreaking line that just kind of just breaks you in two. How can you just leave me standing alone in a world so cold? I thought we had this. I thought we experienced this. But you just leave me alone in a world that's so cold. The world's getting colder. The world's getting more painful. The world's getting more difficult. And even though we have this, where do I end up? You leave me alone in the cold. So now we get the rupture. We go from intimacy to abandonment. We go from intimacy to abandonment. It's not just, I'm lonely. It's, how can you just leave me standing alone in a world that's so cold? It's not just the absence of this lover. It's the entire emotional landscape has now frozen over. There's something cosmic about this loneliness. Like, you have left me so alone that I'm now in a world where it goes from sweat of our bodies to a world that's just absolutely cold. This is complete and total abandonment. You gave me this, but then you left me. And where am I now? Freezing to death, alone in the cold. Thank you for giving me 5 minutes of heat when you left me completely abandoned. Maybe I'm just too demanding. Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold. Now, this is where he kind of shifts from this romantic rupture, this romantic break. He goes from maybe romantic grief to, what do we call it? Psychological exposure. He now begins to expose himself. He's taking the focus off her and he's looking into himself. He's not blaming her. Even though he's like, how could you leave me here? He's not blaming her. He's questioning himself. The first line is relational. Maybe I'm just too demanding. But the second turns inward. Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold. Now, this is where Prince is confessing an inherited dysfunction. Now, this is where it gets really, really, really deep here, all right? Prince is confessing publicly that maybe he has inherited a dysfunction that comes from his upbringing, his father. His father, John L. Nelson, and this is true story, this is true life, was a jazz musician with a complicated history. His parents had a violent relationship, and Prince grew up with trauma. And when I learned this, when he says, maybe I'm just like my father, this is when the song started becoming more for me than it did for other people. Because I was like, man, I get it, Prince. I get it. I get it. People show up. It may be wonderful for 5 minutes, but then you're abandoned and you're left. And then you start thinking, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the broken one. I was brought up in dysfunction. Maybe I'm just too demanding. Maybe I'm just too bold. Maybe the problem is all me because I was raised in this mess and maybe I am the mess. Now, I'm going to look here because I want to make sure I got the lines perfectly. I want to make sure I got the line. Yes. Okay. Now, when I was a teenager, I did a lot of manipulating some of these lyrics. Okay. So I've got to sometimes go back and make sure I've got the lyrics down perfectly in my notes because I do have to, how I typically listen to this song. When he talks, maybe I'm like my father, and then he says the next line about his mother, I always sung the lyrics and recited the lyrics as if he's like, maybe I'm like my father, maybe I'm like my mother. Like that he put both on him. That's the way I always remembered it. And it's the way I always recited it. And it's the way I always used it. Because I felt like, yeah, people show up. They're going to abandon you anyway. They're going to leave you in a world so cold. They're going to go back to their nice little warm world. You're going to be left in the cold. That's where it always happens. You're always going to be abandoned. Nobody's going to ever stick it out. And maybe the issue is the reason you're left in the cold is because maybe I'm just like my father. Maybe I'm just like my mother. That's how I would interpret it. But the lyrics that's not an exact reading of the lyrics. Because he does say, maybe I'm just like my father. But then he says this, maybe you're just like my mother. She's never satisfied. Now he's projecting her into his past and his past into her. So in a sense, it's no longer just a relationship, it's a generational reenactment. His mother and father were a broken mess. And now he's projecting that broken mess onto this relationship. Maybe I'm like my father, maybe you're like my mother, and that's why it's going to end up the way it does. He's projecting a generational reenactment. We're reenacting what I've already gone through, or I watched. I mean, in other words, what he watched occur. Why do we scream at each other? This is what it sounds like when doves cry. So I think this is the thesis. Why do we scream at each other? This is what it sounds like when doves cry. I think this is, in a sense, becomes Prince's thesis to some level, right? For me, I could be reading into this, the dove usually serves as a symbol of peace. I think almost everyone agrees with that. Some say it's a symbol of purity. Many would say it's a symbol of the Holy Spirit. Some would say it's a symbol of love, but the dove is crying. And I think it's supposed to, wait, this is what it sounds like when a dove's crying. A dove's not supposed to cry. It's peace, it's purity, it's the Holy Spirit, it's love. So they say this is what it sounds like when the doves cry. It shows you that this is not normal. Something is so broken. The line is to kind of give you kind of an unresolvable tension. Screaming replaces intimacy. Despair replaces harmony. The dove, instead of cooing or flying, is crying. It's not just the end of a relationship, it's the collapse of emotional and spiritual meaning. This is what it sounds like when doves cry. This is where it ends up. This is how I end up alone in the cold. This is how I end up in a cold world. And maybe it's because I'm like my father, maybe because it's like you're my mother, but this is how it always ends. It always ends in brokenness and despair and no. And that captures that almost nihilistic, jaded, defeated feeling. Touch, if you will, my stomach. Feel how it trembles inside. You've got the butterflies all tied up. Don't make me chase you. Even doves have pride. He's physically anxious, nervous. He has kind of a nervous system level kind of distress. But even in his pleading, there's a limit. Hey, even doves have pride. Even symbols of peace won't be humiliated forever. Hey, don't do this to me over and 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 over again. Don't show up to give me, 15, 20 minutes of sweat covering our body to then leave me alone in the cold. Stop it. There comes a point that I have enough pride to say no. Even if I'm just like my father, and even if you're just like my mother, it doesn't matter. Enough is enough. And then maybe I'm just like my father. The loop returns multiple times. There's no resolution in the song. And that's probably one of the reasons I love a lot of music. There isn't resolution because there's never any stinking resolution in life, usually. The questions, in a sense, stay open. Is it her fault or is it his? Is he repeating the past? Is she just like the people who hurt him in the past? Hey, you're just like my mother. Is he the problem and has always been the problem because he's just like his father? So that's where the song kind of haunts me and haunts many people because there is no answer. It's not the sound in a sense of love ending. It's the sound of what love was trying to cover up all along. Trauma, fear, generational pain, and an unhealed soul. Maybe it's what happens when intimacy fails, not because of one person's mistake, but because of the emotional wiring behind the relationship was damaged before it even started. Is that kind of like, hey, look, there's no hope. You're broken, I'm broken. And I've got the perfect model of brokenness. I'm like my father, you're like my mother. This is what it sounds like when doves cry. So this thing's finished because the emotional wiring has been broken from the beginning. Is this the sound of being known and not being able to survive it? Is it the sound of coming face to face with reality and not being able to survive it? I don't know. The song captures so many emotions. Now, for me, each line, I could take one little line, one little segment, and then I could just run off to a million different stories and ideas and thoughts. Like, I didn't always follow, so just so that you know, I didn't always follow the narrative of this. Like a lot of songs, I would follow the narrative. A lot of Prince's songs, I would take a line and just in my mind, I would be in a million different places and a million different things, experiencing a million different things. In some ways, that's why I had a fondness to the music of Prince, is I could just grab onto, well, I thought he was a musical genius, which he was. Again, I'm not saying he was Christian, not saying anything like that. I mean, his music, remember, it was the Purple Rain album that Christians wanted basically banned and wanted warning labels put on because of the song Darling Nikki, which we won't get into, right? So clearly, Christians were opposed, and they would still be opposed to it. But for me, I didn't really care what Christians were running around screaming, because they didn't offer me anything other than their garbage platitudes and ridiculous understanding of life. Prince gave me something real, and each line gave me, I won't say an escape, but it gave me a chance to take a line and formulate it into my own narrative about my own existence and my own experience, if that makes sense. And I used a lot of what he wrote in, well, a particular letter that I had to write, and maybe I'll talk about it before this is over, all right? So if we kind of that's kind of the song. I mean, I could break it down a little bit more, but you get the basic idea. Now, by the time the song When Doves Cry hit the airwaves in June of 84, I mean, May of 84, I don't know when it actually showed up on radio, but by June of 84, it clearly was on radio. I think it's fair to say it was unlike anything else on radio. Again, the no bass line already set it apart. In some ways, it kind of has sparse instrumentation. It had a blend of rock, funk, gospel, and kind of a synthesizer minimalism, I think maybe is a good way to describe it. I don't know. I don't know if my musical descriptions there work. In some ways, you would think it shouldn't have worked on paper, but it definitely worked. And I think it didn't just top the charts. I think for many, it cracked open our psyche, our psychological well-being. From a production standpoint, like I said, Prince removed the bass line at the very last minute. I think this was not just unconventional, it was against every rule in pop music at the time. So then what was left was raw. It was empty. It was exposed. And that sound was to match the emotion, which I thought was brilliant. I don't think it wasn't there to fill the silence. A lot of times people have music on just to fill the silence. They want to fill it up with something because they don't like the silence. I think When Doves Cry didn't fill the silence, it made you sit in the song. It made you sit in it. And maybe that silence that this song then kind of made you sit in with it. I think this is where many of us teenagers hurt ourselves. I want you to think of teenagers in the summer of 84. In 1984, as teenagers, we were stepping into a world of confusion, emotional intensity, and identity crisis. Divorce rates, I believe in 1984, now you could correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they're at an all-time high, or were very high in 1984. Family dysfunction was no longer hidden. It was lived. It was in the open. It's like, and for some kids, they didn't have any experience with it, but for some of us, I was not just in it. I was drowning in family dysfunction. Many of us teenagers were being raised in households of silence, of violence, and of instability. MTV was exploding. MTV was becoming my best friend. Culture was clearly shifting. Morality definitely was being questioned. The Cold War was still hung in the background, like, when are we going to be taken out by a nuke from Russia? And then there came Prince, screaming the questions that teenagers felt but could not articulate. Why do we scream at each other? Maybe I'm just like my father. Maybe you're just like my mother. See, Prince wasn't offering a polished, healthy picture of love. He was offering the real emotional chaos that happens when desire meets unresolved trauma. And for us teenagers, many of us who were just beginning to feel things deeply for the first time, we recognized ourselves, that longing for love. that fear of being abandoned if we even found it. That confusion of, I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to become my parents. I don't want to be anything like my parents. That those feelings of anger, those feelings of hope, those feelings of shame, being a teenager. And guess what I did not want? I didn't want a stinking lecture. I didn't want an after-school special on ABC. You know what? I didn't even really want a solution. I wanted someone to simply name it, own it, and acknowledge it. And guess who did? Prince. Now, this was not a Christian youth group song. Thank you, God. Thank you, the heavens, whoever I want to thank. I'm glad it wasn't a Christian youth group song. It definitely was, you could say, sensual. It was psychological. And for many, it may have been considered sacrilegious. At least the album was definitely considered sacrilegious. I mean, Prince was considered sacrilegious constantly. But I think for me, it was liberating. It kind of showed me that I could take all of it. I could take all of my questions. I could take all of my dysfunction. I could take all of my passion. I could take all of my spiritual ache. I could take even all of my family baggage, and that you could bring it to art, or you could hear it sung to you in art. And it wasn't just a hit, it was a mirror. And that mirror was powerful. Now, the movie drops in July of '84. I don't remember the exact date the movie drops. I think it was like the 20-something, 24th maybe. I can't remember. But the movie comes out later that month. It was July 7th, I think, is when the song becomes number one. Later that month, the movie drops. Obviously, as teenagers, many of us lined up to see it. And I saw it far more than once. I don't even know how many times I've seen it. But here's the thing. I didn't watch Prince. I felt him. Because in some ways, I was him. I was fighting for my own identity. I definitely I wasn't haunted by my upbringing. I was being tortured in my upbringing. And I was desperate to create something beautiful before being emotionally drowned. And all these years later, the song still holds up because the world is still cold. Families are still broken. Teenagers are still screaming, and we're still asking, why do we scream at each other? Now, in the summer of '84, school let out. The Texas sun was relentless. Now, other kids were talking about pool parties and talking about cassette tapes and talking about 4th of July fireworks. I was trying to survive. I lived in a house filled with violence, fear, and isolation. Things happened to me that no child, no human being should ever endure. I was beaten. I was burned. I was degraded. I was made to feel worthless. And I still had the very vivid memory of my own mother calling me into a room, pointing a gun at her head, and telling me, I'm going to kill myself, and it's because of you. So I was learning what hell looks like while I was still breathing. So when Prince sang, how can you just leave me standing alone in a world that's so cold? It wasn't music. It was me. I didn't hear When Doves Cry as a catchy song. I heard it as a confession from someone who understood the pain of not belonging, the confusion of family chaos, the ache of wanting love but not knowing how to receive it or even to give it. Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold. Maybe you're just like my mother. She's never satisfied. These were not lyrics. They were like a diagnostic, but I read them as maybe I'm like my father. Maybe I'm like my mother. I read them as both being about me. For me, they were naming a kind of a generational torment. The soul, the wounds that I had in my soul, I mean, we carry them. When you're born into dysfunction, you didn't choose. Nobody chooses to be born into dysfunction of whatever dysfunction you encountered. Nobody chooses that, but you carry that trauma. And as for me, a teenager trapped in a cycle of abuse with no therapist, no advocate, no safe space, this song was language. This song was everything. And when the movie hit the theaters, I went to see it. And I wasn't just watching Prince. I was Prince. I was brooding and silent. I had the inability to express what was dying inside. The music was my therapy. The violence in his home was the violence in my home. The weight of trying to become what hurt you. The trying of not, I think I should say, the weight of trying not to become what had hurt me. I watched him do all of this in the movie. The paralyzing guilt of watching someone you love self-destruct. And then you have in the movie the scene with his father. I'm not going to give it away for anyone who hasn't seen it. It didn't need any explanation to me because I'd already lived my own version of it. See, I was the kid being told that my existence was the reason for someone else's suicidal despair. And somehow, watching that all unfold in that movie made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. See, Prince gave me permission to feel what the church often silenced: grief, rage, lust, shame, confusion, and love wrapped in pain. The church told me to smile, pray, believe. Prince told me, scream. And I needed to scream. So where's the gospel? It's not in moral lessons. It's not in just forgive and move on. It's not just pretending everything's okay. The gospel is for those who know what it feels like to live in a world so cold, to scream at those they love, to fear they're becoming what destroyed them, to tremble when someone touches their stomach, to think even doves have pride. It's for people who have nothing left but a cry, and that is what grace answers. So what does it sound like when doves cry? It sounds like a human soul groaning under the weight of sin and suffering even though you never asked for it. You're suffering and you didn't ask for the suffering. It sounds like creation groaning. The whole creation has been groaning, waiting for the redemption, Romans chapter 8. It sounds like Good Friday, not Easter morning. And maybe that's where some of us are. Now, sometime tonight, the streets will be quiet. I can remember being in the room late at night, and the cassette deck would click softly as the tape was rewinding. I would be alone. I would be in my room. I would have memories. And I spent a lot of time in those rooms alone at night trying to make sense of why love leaves you cold and lonely in a world that's so cold. Why do families fail? Why do parents beat their own kids? Why do you get tortured? Why silence is louder than screams? And why the ones we sometimes need the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest or just abandon us. If Prince gave voice to that ache in When Doves Cry, then maybe we can let this episode be a benediction for all the doves who never stopped crying. And if your childhood was violence masked as discipline, if your worth was questioned before you even knew who you were, if you felt every lyric in that song like a scar, you're not weak, you're not forgotten, and you're not alone. The world is still cold, and sometimes the ones who are supposed to hold us safe are the ones, well, who won't. And just remember, the gospel isn't for those of us who are perfect. It's for the abandoned. It's for the beaten. It's for the betrayed. It's for the exhausted. And it's for the guilty. It's for the doves crying in the dark. So wherever you are right now, if you're sitting in the same kind of pain, I definitely know you're not defined by what broke you. You're not owned by what hurt you. And I don't care what the church says, you're not disqualified from grace. Not because you're healed, but because you aren't healed. And if the only prayer you can offer tonight is silence or tears or maybe the low hum of a Prince song echoing through the walls, let it be enough, because when doves cry, sometimes it's all we can do. Sometimes that's enough. Now, on the album, Purple Rain, you have the song Purple Rain. You have the song When Doves Cry. And a lot of those words I took and reformed when I had to write a letter to my mother that I had to read at her grave. And what's kind of messed up is in some of the letter, I blame myself for being abused. This is what it sounds like when doves cry. A throwback to the summer of 1984. That's why music impacts people. You may sit back and don't get it, don't like it, condemn it. But every song you don't like and every song you talk trash about, that song could be very meaningful to someone. So you always need to remember that. For some people, it's just a song with a good beat. For others, a song can be a life jacket keeping them afloat during a massive flood. Next time, we'll get back to a song from 2025. God bless.